Hey everyone, this is Mike. Today we're back to Iceborne and I wanted to talk a little bit about the Charge Blade as it is my favorite weapon in the game. And it's actually got some really cool new additions in Iceborne itself. So I'm going to divide the video in two different parts. In the first part I'm going to be talking about the weapon itself, why I think it is so good and so fun to play. And then in the second part, if I was able to maybe get you interested in the weapon in part 1, in part 2 I'll go over how the weapon flows together and also show you how you have to do these different moves. Now, of course, I play with a controller, so I do know the controls for PlayStation and Xbox controller, but I don't know how it works on the PC mouse and keyboard. I do play on PC, but I do prefer controller for these kinds of games. So I will show you the controls with the controller, but then of course how it actually works on a keyboard you'll have to kind of figure out yourself. So, Charge Blade. Why is this weapon so cool? Well, first of all, it is a weapon that has very good offensive capabilities, but also very strong defensive capabilities. You have a sword and a shield. You can use that shield to block passively. You can just hold it in front of you and block some damage. But you also have attacks called point guards. Now, during certain animations of your attacks, there will be windows where your shield is presented in front of you during that animation. And when you get hit during that during that part of the animation, you get what is called a point guard, and this does a few things for you. First of all, it's a stronger block, so it's stronger than normally blocking with the shield. It will generate some files for you, because that is kind of the resource that the Charge Blade works together with. And then it will also deal some damage to the monster, and this is really cool because you can use it on certain monsters, extremely hard hitting attacks, and just completely negate the damage. For example, a monster I had a lot of trouble with when I first started playing Monster Hunter was Nergigante, when he would like fly up in the air, come crashing down, his one-shot move. Of course you can use the Superman dive to kind of like evade that thing, but I wasn't so very good with it. But then with the Charge Blade, once you know the timing, you can just point guard that attack and take virtually no damage from it. So it's incredibly powerful when it comes to the defensive utility from the point guards, but also just being able to passively block if you don't know the exact timing of those attacks. Then of course you can go into your X mode, or the Power X mode, which is new in Iceborne, where you can dip into that high damage output of the weapon. So you can play in this very mobile style of the sword and shield, dishing out some pretty decent damage, because you can also charge the shield as well as the sword, which I'll talk about how to do that in part 2. But when those two are charged, even sword and shield mode is going to deal a pretty substantial amount of damage. And then when you're able to floor the monster, because you mounted the monster, you get it to the ground, you run it into the wall with your clutch claw, or maybe you trap it or something like that, or you have some tail raiders following you around that are snaring the monster or something like that, because I had that happen for the first time yesterday. It was pretty cool to see. So when you have those bigger opportunities of dealing damage, that's when you can go into X mode and then you can dish out some serious hurt. Because when you're in X mode, or even when you're in Power X mode, you're going to be dishing out a serious amount of damage. Of course, you can go into X mode when the monster is just running around, but while in X mode you are a lot slower. You also don't have that shield available to you, because your shield is at the tip of your sword basically. So you're going to be losing a lot of that defensive capability, and I personally prefer to play a little bit more defensive at this time, because I don't know all of these new monsters' moves yet. Which, by the way, the gameplay you're watching in the background is a Barbatos, I believe it's called. Me and a friend of mine were hunting the tempered version of it in the Elder's Recess, which was pretty fun actually. Because usually I like playing this game solo most of the time, but sometimes playing with a friend or two can be pretty fun as well. So yeah, that's the gameplay you're seeing in the background. But for the most part, I'm still learning all these new monsters, so I like to play into Sword and Shield most of the time, because it does give me access to a very easy point guard. There are a few different ways on how you can get to those point guards, but some take a lot longer to get there. So it's not necessarily as reactional as you would do, like for example, press your dodge roll or something like that. So you do need to kind of predict the movement sometimes of those monsters, which one of the point guards is really easy to get to and really fast to get to as well, so you can kind of use it reactively like your dodge. But some of the others, especially when you're in X mode, they take a little bit longer to get there. So that's why I think this weapon is really cool. Not only does it just look amazing, because you're charging your blade, you're storing those files, you're transferring them to your shield or your sword, you're charging them as well, and then you've got that very big super amped element discharge, which looks pretty cool as well. But you also have all of those other things incorporated with it, which I think is really cool. So that's why I like the Charge Blade. It's very defensive, it's very offensive, it looks amazing, and it's just really fun to play. Let's now talk about how you actually play with the weapon. Alright, so for the tutorial part of the video, I guess you could say, there are two different modes that you can use your weapon in. Either you have your normal sword and shield mode, in which you can use your shield to also guard attacks, and you of course also have X mode. Now I'm not going to show off all of the different moves that you have available to you, because then this is just going to take way too long, but I'm going to show you the main different moves that we're mainly going to be using. So while you're in sword and shield mode, you can charge your blade, as you can see, or well, charge your files. As you can see in the top left, now they're yellow. I'm gonna hit a little bit more, now they are red. This is a fully charged file. You can also see it kind of reflected on the blade because it's now red. If we keep hitting the boss, we're going to overcharge our files and we're basically going to be bouncing off all the time. So you don't want this to happen. So to store, we press guard and B. You can also see all of the controls on the top of the screen, of course. If you are playing with a PlayStation controller, everything that is Y is going to be triangle and B is going to be circle, if I'm not mistaken. So, whilst we have our files charged, the first thing that we want to do is transfer those into our shield. We do that as the following: YB, YB, and then right trigger after the third hit, because that is going to store the files into our shield, and now our shield is glowing. When the shield is glowing, we can also put our sword in the shield to charge the sword. Now, having a sword charge will not only make it deal more damage, but it will also grant you natural mind's eye, I believe it's called. Basically, this means that you can't bounce off of the monster anymore. So when you can see that right now we are overcharging our files, but I'm not bouncing. This can also be really useful for example, if you are fighting a monster that has a very tough skin, where you normally need like white sharpness or something. You can just charge your blade and you won't bounce off either. So of course, if you don't have your sword charged, whenever your files are getting red, just store them. When we have our shield charged, we basically always want to have this, because otherwise we can't use our super amped element discharge, which looks like this. You just use YB 3 times, and then instead of cancelling out, you just let it roll, and then you do your strongest attack. Now, to get to this super amped element discharge, we do have a few different ways of getting there, and we also have two different ways of cancelling out of it. So I'm first of all gonna store my files again. So the first way to cancel out of it I've shown before already, which is to use right trigger and you go and store those files into your shield. The second way to cancel out of it is to go into the Power X mode. To go into Power X mode, you do need to have files charged, because otherwise you can't go in there. And whilst in Power X mode, you're also going to be draining those files. So instead of pressing right triggers to cancel, we're now pressing left triggers to cancel. And this will make it so that we go into Power X mode. If you look at the top left, you can also see that we now have a new icon. And then all of our attacks in the X mode are going to be empowered. And as you can see, our shield is also spinning at the end. And then of course we can just go back to sword and shield mode whenever we want to by pressing right trigger. The Power X mode works the same as normal X mode, as you can see. I mean, X mode now, we have the same attacks that we had in Power X mode, and I can go back by pressing right trigger. The reason why this is really good, the Power X mode, is because not only does it allow you to deal more damage, but it also means that if you need to cancel out of that super amped element discharge, you can just very quickly go back into the Power X mode. Of course, from X mode you can also go into super amped element discharge and basically just stay in there as well. So as you can see, you can just kind of loop it around if you do not want to use that super amped element discharge. To get the super amped element discharge, there are three main ways of getting it. The one from sword and shield mode, which is just like this, YB 3 times. I don't have files charged, so you don't see the big explosion, but you still get the idea. The second way is from in X mode. When you don't have any combo going, just pressing YB will immediately get you there. So this is really good for waking up monsters. And then the last way to do it is whilst you're in X mode as a combo finisher. If you just press circle 3 times or B 3 times, then you go into the super amped element discharge as well. Of course, you do want to have files charged for this, because otherwise it's not going to be doing as much damage. And you also need to have your shield charged for this super amped element discharge as well. There is a third way to cancel out of the element discharge, which is pulling back and pressing triangle or Y, and then you just do the normal empty element discharge, not the super empty element discharge. This will only consume one file, and it will also deal less damage, so it's good to kind of like in a emergency situation where you're like, well, I don't have the time to write out the full animation, or I don't want to waste all of my files, then you can do that instead if you know if, for example, the monster is gonna run away. Now, if you do not have your shield charged, which as you can see, my shield charge just ran out, if you then try to do the super empty element discharge, you're gonna do the normal one anyways. So you do need to have your shield charged in order to do the super empty element discharge. So we're gonna charge our shield real quick, gonna grab some files, and then that enough? No, it's not even one file. Feels bad. But basically, you do want to have at least one file charged and a charged shield in order to do the super empty element discharge. And as you can see, now we do have that big shockwave. So that's pretty much the basics of Charge Blade. I usually like to run around in Sword and Shield the most. Also, yeah, when we are in X mode and we have files charged, we also are going to be consuming those files on all of our X attacks, and we're going to be dealing extra damage with that. Now, the reason why we want to charge our shield is not only because of the extra damage that we're going to get from the super empty element discharge, but a charged shield would also deal more damage and allow you to block more efficiently, not only from the normal block, but you can also execute attacks which are called point guards. Now, point guards are basically parts of an animation where your shield will be presented in front of you. For example, when I do this, here my shield is presented in front of me, or when I go into X mode and I come back, shield is in front of me, and even going into X mode, here, real quickly at the start of the animation, the shield is in front of me, and that's a point guard. So I'm gonna hit this real quick, and then I'm gonna use the X morph to show you how to basically block with it. There you go, point guard. Now, this does two things for you. First of all, it will insanely reduce the damage that you're going to be taking. You can literally take ultimates of certain bosses of this in the face, like for example Nergigante doing his big dive, without taking any damage. So it's really strong for that. Now, not only that, but you can also use this to deal damage to the monster. It will also charge your files a little bit, and it can also KO monsters even, which is really cool. But another thing you can do with this is you can go immediately in the super empty element discharge from out of a point guard. So if you can, for example, block a monster with this, for example, say Diablos is charging underground, and you're able to just block his attack, and then you can just immediately go into that super empty element discharge when he is stunned in that brief moment. So that's pretty much the basics of Charge Blade, and that's kind of how it all works together. So that's Charge Blade. I really like the weapon as from a design standpoint. It's really fun to play around in the two different modes, having both the maneuverability and the defensive nature of Sword and Shield, and then of course also having the very offensive nature and the high damage of the X mode, and then of course switching in between of them is so fluid that it makes it my favorite weapon in the game. So that's gonna be it for me. I hope I was able to interest some of you guys to try out Charge Blade as well, because it is a really fun weapon. Takes some time to learn all of the different moves, but once you know what you're doing, you're going to be doing a hell of a lot of damage while taking a lot of, well, not a lot of damage at all, basically. So that's gonna be it for me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.